Well, welcome to the 8th IEEE Research Boost, organized by the IEEE Montreal section and IEEE Montreal Industrial Relations Committee. The theme of this event is promoting industry-driven research. And as you might know, we have organized the 7th edition of this event last year. It was an online event like this one. But let me give you a short history of the Research Boost events. It was launched first in 2016 by the IEEE Montreal Industrial Relations Committee in the city of Montreal. And so far we have organized 7 editions of this event, 4 times at Concordia University and 2 times at ETS Montreal. And the last one in 2020, it was a virtual event. And we have had great speakers from academia, industry, and government with an average attendees of 110. In the last event, it was in October 2020, we had almost 70% of our attendees were from academia, graduate students, and postdoctoral fellows from different universities in Montreal, and the rest were from industry. In some of the previous editions, we had poster presentation competitions and also a startup showcasing. This year, we decided to have a 3-minute presentation for the first time. This is our first time to organize this 3-minute presentation competition. And it's been amazing. We have received a lot of abstracts and it was not expected. And we had to change the structure of the event. Instead of having 2 separate presentation sessions, we shift all the presentation to the end of the event. And we have, for today, we have 25 presentations in the 3-minute competition. In this edition, we have amazing speakers from government and from industry. I should thank them for accepting our invitation. And we cannot wait to hear from them and about all the amazing topics that we are going to talk about. Each talk will take between 15 to 20 minutes with a few minutes for question and answer. If any of the audience has any questions, please write it in the chat and we'll read it at the end of each talk. So with this, I'll introduce our first speaker, Dr. Isar Nejadgholi, research officer at National Research Council Canada. Dr. Isar is also an adjunct professor at the University of Ottawa. She has 20 years of experience designing and deploying machine learning systems in various applications in academic and industrial environments. Her current research focus is on applying deep learning models to natural language processing tasks, mainly medical and social media text analysis. So Dr. Isar, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and it's very good to see you here. Please, if you want, share your screen. I think you're already a co-host.
Do you have my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hamid Reza, for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Isar. It's my pleasure to be here tonight and talk about my work. I'm going to talk about confronting online abuse with natural language processing, which has been the focus of my work for the past couple of years, I should say. So, why online abuse? Why do we think it's an important problem to tackle, and why natural language processing can help with this problem? Actually, statistics show that 4 billion people at least every day interact on social media, online platforms, and it has been an essential tool in our lives these days for communications. But the thing is that the companies that run these platforms, their business model is mainly based on drawing attention of the users and keeping them busy on the platform. And unfortunately, offensive language and abusive language draws a lot of attention. So it can easily go viral. And for that reason, I should say the voice of people that intend to abuse others is louder on online platforms than, let's say, traditional physical communication settings. That's why it's been a severe problem. 41% of Americans say that they have experienced some sort of online harassment. And it can happen in all sorts of communications, all sorts of conversations, mostly when people talk about their political views, but generally in all sorts of conversations that have something to do with the elements of identities of people, like gender, race, and so on. So because of the severity of the problem, many social media platforms and even countries are thinking about putting policies in place and doing at least some sort of content moderation. And the way it's being done is mainly by hiring human moderators. They have to go through all the content. It's a very disturbing job that they have to do every day, and they have to make this decision that either they want to keep or delete the content. As NLP researchers, we ask, how can we help these people, and how can we generally help to make online platforms a safer place with automated content moderation, or at least assisting these people with AI and making their lives a little bit easier. Okay, so to tackle this problem, the first thing that we have to think about is how to formulate this task as an NLP task. It has been typically formulated as a supervised classification task, and in its basic form is a binary classifier that distinguishes between hate speech and normal speech. But the challenge is how to define hate speech. It's not something that can be clearly defined. So for that reason, like, you will see all sorts of research, all sorts of definitions on offensive language, hate speech, abusive language, toxic language, all of these terms. And generally, generalizability has been a crisis in this domain, because the definitions are ambiguous, and it's very hard to come up with clear definitions of this task. Some of the work went a little bit further, and they said, we don't want a simple binary classifier, we want a multi-class or multi-label classifier that gives us more information about the type of the behavior or the severity of the behavior. So they define not only one class, but different classes. But again, usually the definitions are ambiguous, and there are like obscure boundaries between categories. We can also design more advanced systems that give us not only the tags, but more information, for example, about who was the target of abuse and who was targeted at what level. And that's, again, a classification task. After we formulated the task, the next step is collecting the data. How do we collect data for this task? People showed that if you just go on Twitter and like randomly sample data, the ratio of the abusive contents that you will find is very low for training a classifier. Although abusive language is very harmful, it's not very frequent, so it's not easy to find that data. For that reason, we usually have to come up with some sort of boosted sampling strategy, so we can query the posts with abusive words that we know, or users or communities that are known for these kinds of behaviors. Or we can look at the terms that are associated with the identity terms that are target of abuse. And those are the ways that we can actually get our hands on that data. But when we find that data, there are all sorts of other decisions that we have to make. And the most important one is, what are the elements of the data that we want to collect? Do we want to collect just the post, just the text, or we want more information about the context of the conversation, or about user info or things like that? And there are pros and cons with every decision that we make at this stage. Okay, after we collect data, the next step is annotating the data, which I think is the most important and challenging step of building an algorithm for abusive language detection. The reason being, not only the definitions are ambiguous and it's very hard to come up with clear definitions, but this task is very subjective. And people's experiences, people's lived lives really impacts how they perceive things. So something might be really offensive to someone, but not very offensive to someone else. For that reason, it's hard to get high quality annotations and agreement between annotators. And the way we deal with this problem is that we usually hire multiple annotators to look at a single post. And we try to get high agreement between them. But if not, then we have to have some sort of a strategy to aggregate all of those votes to one single tag so that we can train our classifier. After we have an annotated data set, the next step is, of course, training a classifier. If we just want a simple basic classifier, then like many other NLP tasks, we can get state-of-the-art results with pre-trained language models. But we can look at other techniques. For example, multitask learning has been very favorite in this field because abusive language is very related to emotion detection, is very related to sentiment analysis. So we can learn different tasks at the same time and they improve each other's accuracy. Data augmentation, few-shot learning, zero-shot learning has been very important in this field because of the data scarcity. And of course, retraining and active learning is very important because language is a live entity and it changes all the time. So we have to have some sort of method to keep updating our classifiers. Okay, so far I mostly talked about the big picture of the field and the severity of the problem and how we usually design a solution for this problem. For the rest of my talk, I want to talk about the harms that can be caused by automatic content moderation. Of course, we do this research with the best of intentions and we want to help, but there's always some unintended consequences with the choices that we make in building these algorithms. And if we really want to deploy these systems, it's important to be aware of those consequences. You might have seen in the news that automatic content moderation can silence marginalized voices, and that's actually true. Many communities have reported that when they talk about racism, their conversation is flagged as racist content, which as an NLP researcher, I understand what that happens, but in a real application, that shouldn't be happening. The algorithms are very sensitive to some kinds of dialects like African American English. And these are all sorts of problems that we should be aware of and we should try to address before deploying these systems. In response to this issue, we have recently published a survey paper that looks at this field from the ethical and human rights perspective. It's a very long paper. It's published at JER. I will go through it very quickly, but I encourage you to look at it if you're interested in the topic. Okay, so what we did in this paper, we took an ethical and human rights framework designed by great researchers at Harvard University. They designed this framework for ethical AI, and actually they identified 8 pillars that ethical AI should be organized around these pillars. So we took these pillars and we looked at the field of abusive language detection with respect to all of these pillars, and we analyzed the field. The first pillar I want to talk about is promotion of human values. When we design an algorithm to detect abusive language, actually we are dealing with a trade-off between two widely accepted human values, one being freedom of speech, the other one respect for equality and dignity. On one hand, we want to make online platforms a safe place for everyone. But on the other hand, we don't want to censor people just because they said something that was a little bit controversial. That's a very hard problem to solve, especially for us technical people. So it's important to acknowledge that it's not a technical problem. It's not only a technical problem. It's actually a social problem, and it has to be solved with, like, in collaboration with social scientists. Another pillar that is very important is fairness and non-discrimination. There are tons of works that show the algorithms that we build can cause discrimination. This is just one example that shows identity terms are overrepresented in the abusive part of our data sets. And because of that, these classifiers, these algorithms associate identity terms with abuse, which shouldn't be happening. So when we build these systems, it's very important to think how we can detect these biases, how we can measure these biases, and how we can mitigate them. Safety is another pillar. By safety, we mean, does the system perform as intended? And one important safety risk is the mismatch between the training environments and the ever-changing test environment. Because as I mentioned before, language is a live entity and it changes all the time. We recently submitted a paper to ACL, it's under review. And in that paper, we showed that all the classifiers that were trained before the pandemic are not efficient at all in detecting anti-Asian racism that occurred during the pandemic. So how do we make sure that the systems that we build are safe and they are robust and they can be used when the topics changes? Security is another pillar. Our systems shouldn't be vulnerable to attacks by unauthorized third parties, but the systems that we have right now are very vulnerable, even to very simple changes, like changes in spelling, punctuations, capitalizations, and things like that. And that's, again, another important issue that has to be addressed before deploying a system in real-life application. Transparency and explainability, the most advanced or the most common, I should say, techniques that we have for explaining the decision made by an algorithm is highlighting words, highlighting abusive words. And with the example that I'm showing here, you can see that this is not an adequate way of explaining the decisions of our systems. And for that reason, explainability is one of the most important technical issues that we have to work on. And without explainable systems, it's very hard to deploy these systems responsibly. After going through all of these pillars in our paper, we propose some ways to move forward. I'm going to quickly review those. One of our suggestions is that we should reimagine the task. Considering this task as a classification task and a simple categorization task creates a lot of problems that are not easily solvable. So maybe we should deal with this problem as a natural language understanding problem, and maybe we should try to understand more fine-grained information in a hierarchical level when we look at this content. Also, the action that we take after the decision was made by the algorithm can be much more sophisticated than just keeping or deleting the post. And we are proposing some of the more efficient ways of actions. Advancing explainability is the most important technical solution that we identify in this field. And the reason for that is that with explainability, we'll be able to debug these systems better. We'll be able to validate the system's fairness, safety, and security. And we can understand why the system made a certain decision, and we can appeal the system's decision if we need to. It's also very important to incorporate work from other disciplines, especially social sciences, communication sciences, psychology, and anthropology, because those fields have been working on the problem of hate speech for a long time. There's this accumulated knowledge in those fields that we have to learn and adopt in natural language processing to at least be able to build better data sets and better annotation schemes. One of the most important suggestions that we make is really having the affected communities engaged in our research. If we want to make online platforms safe for a certain community, it's very important to consult with them and ask them what safety means from their perspective and how they perceive the things that are being said about them. So it's important to build a solidaristic relationship with them, building trust with them, including the communities in setting the priorities of our research. And of course, if you want their help, it's important to have a fair and transparent compensation in place. In conclusion, I want to highlight some of the questions that we should be thinking about if we want to deploy the algorithms that we build in research and we want to use them in an industry setting. We should be thinking about these questions. How has the problem been formulated? Who formulated the problem? Where is the data coming from? Is the data representative? If it's not, how do we update the data? How do we augment the data? Who is annotating the data? Or what are their beliefs or implicit biases? Is this just a binary classifier? And if it is a binary classifier, is that adequate for the task that we want to do? How can the decisions be explained? And is there a possibility for appealing the decision if needed? Last but not least, I want to thank my colleagues, Esma Balkir, Kathleen Fraser, Svetlana Kirchenko, who are research scientists at National Research Council Canada. We work on different things. Detecting abusive language is one of them. And generally, we are interested in leveraging insights from ethics and social sciences to develop responsible NLP. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take questions, and I'm always happy to connect. This is my email address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isar. It was really interesting. I see a couple of questions, but I don't think if we have time for all of them. Maybe a balance between interpretability and the performance, the trade-off between the two, if you can address that. I had a couple of questions, but maybe later we can send an email to Isar and ask our questions. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I can quickly talk about the trade-off between interpretability and performance. That's a very, very good question. And the fact that the person that asked this question, Nada, the fact that you realize there is a trade-off there is really smart and it's really important. Yeah, there is a trade-off there. We can use some more interpretable techniques and models, but unfortunately, we can't get the state-of-the-art accuracy or FS score there. But it really depends on what we want to do. There are some kind of like post-training interpretability methods that we can apply even when we use deep learning models, because we have this interpretability problem when we are using deep learning models. They're just black box. The community is really working hard on building this post-training interpretability methods. But there are lots of questions that has to be answered there. Explanations or interpretations for whom? For the end user or for an engineer who is going to debug the system? or and what is really the goal of that explanations? Do we just want to persuade people that the system is doing reasonable, or we want to be truthful to what the system is actually doing? And that's very hard in case of deep learning models. It's very hard to know what the system is really relying on. So I only can say that there is this trade-off. People are aware of that. People are working on that, but it's one of the ongoing and open questions of the field.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, if you have questions, send an email to Isar. I see like a lot of questions, but we really don't have time. And we should move on to our next speaker. Thank you very much again, Isar, for your time and this amazing talk.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So you need to.
Yeah, I'm trying to stop
sure.
sharing. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, our second talk today is a joint talk from Dr. Jiho Cho. He's a co-founder and the VP of Advanced Research at AIRE 3D, and also Pier-luc Tardif, Director of Business Development at AIRE 3D. I go very quickly over your bios first. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and joining this event and giving us your talk. Dr. Jiho is a computer vision and machine learning scientist with more than 10 years of experience on designing and implementing software algorithm with a focus on depth sensing and processing. He holds a PhD in information and mechatronics from Korea with stints at ETH Zurich, the University of Tokyo, and Vienna University of Technology. He has published more than 20 high-impact scientific papers and 3 international and national patents. As I said, he's currently co-founder and VP of Advanced Research at AIRE 3D. Also, Mr. Pier-luc graduated from École Polytechnique de Montreal with a master's degree in biomedical engineering, focused on optical coherence tomography and other biophotonics techniques. He holds a bachelor's degree in physics from Université de Montréal. He has been with AIRE 3D for almost 3 years, initially as an imaging scientist, and currently he's a director of business development. So with this, I'll hand it to Dr. Jiho to talk about transmissive diffraction masks, a passive RGBD machine vision solution.
Yeah, thank you for kind introduction. Actually, like Pier-luc will start the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation and for the introduction. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah.
All right, great. So I guess we'll get started. Yeah, so the presentation is to give an overview of what we do here at AIRE 3D. Mainly transmissive diffraction masks, which are a type of optical encoder that can transform any standard CMOS sensor into an RGBD machine vision solution. And by RGBD, we mean RGB meaning red, green, blue. So a standard 2D image and D being depth. So we get the 2D and the 3D. I guess I'll get started with this picture here, which is a Cooper, which is our company mascot and very good boy. So what we're seeing here is the kind of data we're able to get with our sensors. This is a heat map of depth. So points that are red are basically closer to us and points that are blue are further. So we'll show you how we're able to get images like that without degrading the 2D image and how that can be applied to a wide array of different applications. So just to give a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to give a quick overview of our tech and the underlying principles. Then I'm going to explain what the data flow looks like, how we go from raw data to 2D and 3D. Then to compare, I'm going to talk about the benefits and compare our tech to other depth sensing technology and where we stand out. and then I'll pass it over to Jiho to discuss applications. So yeah, to give an overview of the tech, we basically combine three things. The first being a standard CMOS sensor, as you can see on the image in red, green, and blue here. This being the Bayer pattern and the pixel wells underneath. And then the optical encoder, which is the transmissive diffraction mask, or TDM, for the remainder of this talk. So the TDM is this very, very thin diffraction grating, which is transparent, but it creates diffraction by creating differences in phase. So it's very thin. It's only a few microns thick, and it can be placed directly above the micro lenses of the CMOS sensor. So it's done at the moment of fabrication. And this creates a modulated signal that we can decode with our algorithm depth IQ to get depth. So in order, before we jump in and how we do that, we got to go through a quick physics lesson. It'll be brief, I promise. So just to give a recap on diffraction. So diffraction is the phenomenon by which electromagnetic wave will be bent or warped when interacting with either an obstacle or an aperture. So the classic example is, let's say you have a plane wave hitting a small pinhole. It's going to come out on the other side of the pinhole completely warped. So in this case, you can kind of model this aperture as a point-like source. So you're getting a spherical wavefront after the fact. So this occurs when you have apertures or obstacles that are on the order of magnitude of the wavelength of the incident light. So what we use in our case is slightly different to that. We use something called the Talbot effect, which is basically something that occurs when you have diffraction grating. So you can imagine, instead of having only one of these pinholes, you have an array of them. But instead of modulating the intensity of where the light can go or not go, you modulate the phase by changing the thickness of the grating, which is what occurs here. So the Talbot effect is an effect that occurs at a very close range from the diffraction pattern. We're talking a few microns. And what happens is that if you look at B or C, which are called the half Talbot and Talbot length, distances, you see that the diffraction grating is actually re-imaged. So if you were to get an image here, you'd actually see the diffraction grating, because all the phases kind of reline up together. But there's something interesting if you look at the electromagnetic field at A here, which is the a quarter Talbot length. You see that there's a lot of variation in the light field and in this kind of periodic pattern. So if you place a sensor array here at a quarter Talbot length, you'd actually get differences on the pixel intensities depending on where the pixels are. And that's what we leverage to get depth. So how do we do that? If you look at a standard CMOS sensor, you're only sensitive to the intensity of the light and not to its phase, which means that if I had an object here and a lens and a sensor, and I move that object back and forth, I'm changing where the light rays are hitting the sensor and thus the angle of incidence of that light, but I'm not sensitive to that. So I'm only sensitive to the change of intensity, and I won't see a change of intensity, which is a problem if you're trying to get depth. So what we want is angle sensitive pixels, or ASPs, where basically the incident angle and thus the intensity will change depending on where the object is. So if you're able to encode that directly on the pixels, you're able to get depth. And also, the incidence angle will change depending on where you are on the sensor. So knowing these two things, the angle of incidence and where you're looking on the sensor array, you're able to get depth. So knowing all this, here's the basic principle of how our TDM works. So we get incident light, and we have our diffraction grating, which is placed a few microns above so that the pixel array is at the quarter Talbot length. And we have basically here, we'd have like a transparent medium, which would be called the pedestal, just to get the right distance between the grating and the sensor. So this will modulate the light in a way where adjacent pixels will receive different amounts of light depending on the angle of incidence of the light. So if we know this, and we tune the dimensions of the grating in a way that it's roughly that the period is roughly the period of the pixel pitch, we're able to get the angle of incidence of the light rays by looking at pairs of adjacent pixels. And that is the basic principle. Yeah, so there's also interference that comes into play, and that causes regions of enhanced and reduced intensity. And that's basically what we use to get depth. So what does the data flow look like? So on this flow chart here, everything that's the components that are in blue are things that you would have in your standard standard camera data flow. So you have a lens system, a CMOS sensor, which feeds raw data into an ISP. That ISP creates a 2D image, the one we see here, and that will be fed into your application. Now, what we add to this data flow is what you'll see in orange. So the optical encoder, which is the TDM, which we talked about, and then that still goes to the CMOS. There's only one stream of raw data still. We add a pre-filtering layer, which this pre-filtering layer is kind of the secret sauce here. And what this does is basically removes the footprint of the TDM on the 2D image, because it will have an impact and it will slightly change the 2D image, but we can correct for that. And after that, we'll split this new raw data, this pre-filtered data, into two pipelines, one being the ISP, normal ISP. So we keep the 2D image, and then we add the IDP, which is the image depth processing pipeline, which creates a depth map. So here we have kind of the same depth map as I showed previously with Cooper, where red is closer, blue is further, and then we can feed that onto our application. So we can basically convert any CMOS sensor into an RGBD sensor with this optical encoder and depth IQ. So why does this matter? So here's to name some advantages of this technology. One, it's completely passive. If you look at other depth sensing technologies like time of flight or structured light, to name some, you have to send image on, you have to send light onto the scene, light that you know and can decode in order to get depth information. We use a 2D image and ambient light, so that's not something that we have to do. So this means we don't need the real estate of an active solution where you need an illuminator in order to get depth. And also, since you don't have that illuminator, you save power, so your power consumption goes down. And since we're basically using the raw image to get the 2D and the 3D, the ISP and the IDP outputs are in the same reference frame. So it's just a byproduct of the technology that the 2D and 3D data is inherently aligned. So there's no post-processing there to align the data, which is really big plus. In terms of light loss, the TDM is essentially transparent. There will be a small amount of light loss between the interfaces just because of Fresnel's law. but it's very minimal and can be mitigated with anti-reflection coatings. Same goes for MTF. The amount of MTF being the modulation transfer function, which is basically a measure of the amount of detail you can get in the image. It basically boils down to higher resolution. The amount of diffraction we add is small compared to the diffraction you have in your optics in general. So the MTF loss is very minimal, and depending on pixel size, sometimes it's actually zero. So very little degradation to the 2D image. And since physics basically does most of the heavy lifting for us, because we just use the Talbot effect, there's very little post-processing that needs to be done. And that pre-filtering layer that I mentioned is very minimal. So we can keep the algorithms very lightweight, running at 30 plus frames per second if you're on an ARM core on an embedded platform. So that's another big plus, obviously, because you need less computational power. And we can run on CPU and GPU as well. So I will then pass it over to Jiho. Jiho, just tell me when you want me to switch slides.
Thank you, Piero. Yeah, the first example using our sensor is like showing in the video in this slide. Piero mentioned like this is mascot our company, Cooper. So the left bottom is the 2D image you acquired from our sensor, and the right side is our depth map. And then above is the 3-point cloud rendered in the different viewpoint. So because we have RGBD, once we get the intrinsic parameter of the sensor, then we can reproject our data into the 3D world. So as you can see, like from some of the detail are very, some of the features are very like detail well captured, even though we use single frame, like there's no illumination, there's no other camera, there's no temporal information were used to create this 3D point cloud. So go to the next slide, and we tried like some SLAM application. So like this SLAM particularly use RGBD input. So instead of developing like whole new SLAM algorithm, we just try to plug in like our sensor into existing solution. So as you can see from the right video, so the green line, green is the trajectory of your sensor, and then try to reconstruct your environment while you're moving. So yeah, it's also quite interesting project. And the next thing is because we can generate like 3D point cloud and depth map, so we can also generate dense depth map or defocus map. So if your captured image is usually difficult to refocus once it is focused at some distance, but because we have defocus map, we can refocus image by using this information. So the part of the video showing once you click like different object, the image is refocused based on the new focal plane.
Just let the video finish, then I'll.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, the next slide show like previously we first compute the 2D and depth, and then try to use some like this information to develop different use cases. But instead of doing that, we just try to use deep neural network from like a sensor to the end and the learning solution to the final application. So I'm going to show you two different examples using like our sensor with the deep learning application. So the first one is the dense depth estimation. Our sensor is usually like working well on the contrast edge is strong. So it means that like usually you have depth map like in the middle, in the bottom of the image. It's just depth only in the edge. But we try to use some like conventional or the classical approach to fill in between those pixels, but usually the result is not that promising. So we try to use some like deep learning approach to use both RGB and the sparse depth map to reconstruct full dense depth map. So, but the main challenge for this model was trying to get the ground truth data. So we use some the public data set, which is available like for everyone, and then provide like RGB depth, dense depth map, and the surface normal. So we developed like the network to estimate like both surface normal and dense depth map at the same time, and then try to combine like in the end. So the on the right side, the bottom image, the left is the classical approach, which you have like a lot of like a wiggly depth map. But in contrast, in the right side, we get like much clean and then like clear depth discontinuity in the 3D point cloud. So this is the dense depth map estimation result. And then the last example is some like a face authentication. Like we try to focus on the anti-spoofing part. We are not like authorized, like recognize who you are. But instead of doing that, there are like a lot of like attack using your face or phone to fool the system. So what we try to focus on here is that using our like low data to detect the real and fake face for the sensor. So because our like depth can like detect the actually like depth of the face. Usually like a human face is not like flat, and we have 3D structure, but most of our attack like with paper or phone is mostly flat or bent. So we can leverage depth information to distinguish the real and the fake image. So here, like most of the system using the infrared has problem with outside, like in this video, but because our sensor is passive, so we have no problem using like outside. So as you can see here, very bright sunlight, we can detect fake attack really robustly. So this is like compared to just normal 2D the anti-spoofing network, we have achieved like about like 10% gain using our sensor instead of using like only RGB information. Okay, so.
And I realized I'm wearing the same shirt in this video as I am now. I promise I own more than one shirt. Yeah, okay. So that was.
Yeah, thank you for attention. Then.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. I think we have 2-3 questions.
Yeah, so I guess I'll.
Yeah, you go.
I can take the first one, Jiho, maybe you can take the second. So I guess I'll read it for everyone's benefit. So as you use the encoding, I think you would miss some portion of collected light. Is it challenging in dark environment? And is it easy to match the refractive index of different layers in practice, considering your encoding approach? That's a very good question. I think I broached that subject at the very end of my section. So there is a slight loss in quantum efficiency, not of the CMOS itself, but basically if you took a scene with a sensor with a TDM and a scene with a sensor without a TDM and compared the amount of light you're getting, you're going to lose something in the range of 5% of the light at worst. Yeah, around 5%. And that can be mitigated with anti-reflection coating. So you are correct. There is some loss of light. In terms of if it's challenging in darker environments, we've gotten encouraging results on faces down to 30 lux, which, to give everyone a frame of reference, if you're holding your phone and looking at your phone like this in the dark, the light coming on your face is about 30 lux. And we're still able to get depth. So the rule of thumb is if you're able to get a decent looking 2D image, we can get depth out of it. And regarding the refractive indices, so the main challenge there is that in the pedestal, so if the pedestal has a refractive index that's too high, basically your micro lenses become useless because they're not focusing the light, they're not refracting the light properly in the pixel wells. So basically the TDM has to be a higher refractive index, and then the pedestal has to be a lower index, and then the micro lenses well have the index that they have. So yes, if the refractive index of the pedestal is too high, then yes, you would lose even more QE, just because you're basically negating what your micro lenses are doing. So I hope that answered the question. Jiho, do you want to take the second one?
The second question was curious to know if you use compressive sensing will help decrease the computational complexity of the overall model. Yeah, I think it's a good point. Like as Pier-luc mentioned, our computational load is already very minimal. But yeah, I agree. Like if we consider those kind of model, we can decrease further computational complexity, and then also the data itself to transmit. So I think yeah, it's good to consider later. Thank you for your input.
Yes, thank you very much, Pier-luc and Jiho, for the great talk. If anyone else has any question, please contact the email that you see from Pier-luc. And so with this, I think we have one more speaker, our last speaker. Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Yasaman Soudagar, CEO and co-founder at Neurosense. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I'll go briefly over the bio. Dr. Soudagar holds a PhD in experimental quantum optics with a focus on quantum computing. She has invented the optical technology of Neurosense. Since 2015, Dr. Soudagar has raised investment from experts in both neuroscience and neurosurgery and optical field. Under her leadership, and in just 3 years, Neurosense has launched Quartet, a complete hardware-software product, and will soon launch a second product called Chromaton TIA. Thank you very much, and please share your screen. I think you're already the co-host.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks to you all and organizers for inviting me here. So first of all, I'm happy to say that the Chromaton is launched and we are receiving purchase orders for it. What I'm going to do is since this is the focus is on industrial R&D, I want to clarify also why some of just highlight some of the words there. And the reason that I said that is because I'm told that there are a lot of graduate students and postdocs in the group, so I think it will be useful. So when we highlight in my bio that we have raised investment from the experts in neuroscience and in optics, that basically tells other investors that we are really, really legit. So people who understand our technology are giving us money. So that is basically the reason behind that. Having said that, so Neurosense stands for neurons and fluorescence. The focus of the company is to serve patients with brain and spinal cord problems. This is our team. The team consists of mostly PhDs. So I myself, as you heard, I'm a PhD in physics. Miss Sepi Hashemi, she has actually a master's degree in mechanical engineering and another master's degree in physiology from Harvard. And she has a few decades of experience bringing medical devices from ideation to commercialization stage. Dr. Tawfiq Valiente is a neurosurgeon and a neuroscientist. He's the director of epilepsy surgery at Toronto Western Hospital. So we are the co-founding team of Neurescence. Here you see me again because I'm being very egoistic here. Sorry, it's just that this slide would look better if I would do it this way. But basically you see the rest of the team. Dr. Roshni Christo is a neuroscientist, and she has quite a few years of postdoctoral training in addition to her PhD. Dr. Azadeh Sabet-Qadam is another neuroscientist in the same boat with a few years of postdoctoral training. Tina Mahmoudi and Madison Kim are master's degrees in biomedical engineering. They are both continuing to go for grad school and medical school. And Alex here, he's our engineer. His background is actually from electric engineering. And since we started working together, he is also learning a lot about optics, optomechanics. So it's a small team. We basically do everything together. So that is a team, but let's go to the problem we are addressing. So in industry, it is very similar to academia in the sense that you always have a problem to solve. But the problem you solve in industry is something which is, it is not just a scientific or a technical problem. We call it a pain point. It is basically something that a lot of people need. So they will be willing to pay for it, basically. And in this case, the unmet need is related to epilepsy patients. So about 50% of epilepsy patients don't respond to drugs. And basically what happens is from that 50%, about 30% can get referred to surgery. But the surgeries fail 20 to 40% of the time. So you can imagine that there is a group of patients that have no solution at all for their disease because they don't respond to drugs and also the surgery fails. So they have to continue living their lives with the disease. But what is the problem here? Well, the thing is in the brain, the different parts of the brain communicate with each other. In each brain area, there are different types of neurons or brain cells. So they are called excitatory and inhibitory neurons that communicate with each other. And if this communication, if the activity of these types of neurons is kept in balance, the communication is happening properly and the brain functions properly. But if something happens and this communication goes off balance, that is when brain diseases start. So it is specific for epilepsy. Somehow this balance goes off and all neurons start firing in synchrony, and that's when a seizure happens. So basically epilepsy, like many other brain diseases, they call it in the field of neuroscience or neurology to be a circuit disease. So it is not in just one brain area, it is multiple brain areas and multiple types of neurons in these brain areas are involved in causing this disease or in this disease mechanism. So what we need is we need to understand how the brain works, and we need to understand exactly what are the mechanisms of diseases, including in epilepsy, in the level of neurons. The existing technologies that we all know about are fMRI, PET, electrophysiology, that we have currently that can collect data from the brain and they collect functional data. So as the patient is doing some function, data is collected from the brain. But what we really need is, again, a technology that can show us what is happening in the brain in the level of neurons. And the technologies that can do that, they will need to use optics because optical part of the electromagnetic spectrum is pretty much the part that can give such kind of a resolution. And that's basically what we have developed. So this is the chromatome system. I was just saying that it is already released. And this is the quartet system. These are essentially fluorescence microscopes. So when you use optical imaging, you can get very high resolution data. And the devices we have developed, they are quite lightweight and flexible. and they enable chronic implantation and longitudinal data collection, which is functional. So that is basically the major characteristic of the strength of neurescence. And of course, we protect our IP by filing multiple patents. Now, it turns out that the preclinical research has the same problem. For a lot of neuroscience problems, people need to answer or need to figure out how the brain is communicating with itself and basically what goes wrong in this communication that causes the diseases. That is called the disease mechanism. And once you understand the disease mechanism, then you can design and develop therapeutics. Therapeutics meaning either drugs or other therapeutics like deep brain stimulation, for example. So it can either be a drug, or it can be a device, or it can be something like gene therapy. But the thing is to come up and find the best therapeutic solution, you need to understand what the disease mechanism is that you're trying to solve, basically. So that is another application in the preclinical stage. And of course, once you have that, then you can also predict the efficacy of these therapeutics. So I don't know how familiar this crowd is with the issues of neurology and the drugs for this. Basically, the situation is quite bad. Very, very few percentage of drugs pass through FDA approvals, which means that very, very few drugs show efficacy when they go to phase 3 human trials. This is extremely costly. For each compound that gets to the final phase of FDA approvals and gets the approval, the cost is more than $1 billion. So you can imagine that if we can better predict the efficacy of these drugs before such huge costs are incurred, it's going to be much better for everyone. Now, fluorescence imaging, again, forgive me if you all know this. It is just that, you know, being in a multidisciplinary field, one gets used to defining pretty much everything. And by the way, I got this from this website called Nejadgholi. I thought it's called University, and then I realized it's a different institute. So anyways, it is shamelessly stolen from these guys. When you do fluorescence imaging, you basically illuminate your specimen with a certain color of light, with a certain frequency of light. And what happens is the frequency you use, I'm going to call them higher energy photons, because usually it has a higher frequency. So you illuminate with these higher energy photons, and the photons basically interact with the electron levels of whatever complex material you have in your specimen that is fluorescing. And a bit of an energy is basically released into these so-called phonons in the specimen, but then the rest of it converts back to light and gets emitted as photons, which are a bit of a lower energy. So for example, when you illuminate with blue, the specimen can fluoresce in green. So usually you have your light source, you shine it on your specimen, the specimen fluoresces with a different color, which you detect and you project onto the detector. Now, in terms of preclinical imaging, the question is what in the neurons actually fluoresces. So what this is actually quite amazing when I switched to this field, and I still am really amazed by this. So this all comes from the field of genetic engineering. There is this protein called GCAM, and what it does is it is calcium sensitive. It binds to calcium ions, and as it binds to calcium ions, it folds and becomes fluorescent. So it is really an amazing structure. And the further beauty of this is that in the field of genetic engineering, these guys, they can engineer viruses, and then they basically encode a part of the DNA that can result into the creation of this GCAM protein in cells. So they create this so-called viral construct, they inject it into the parts of the brain that they want to image. And the cells basically absorb, if that is not the right word, but they basically get these viruses, if you will, and the virus changes the DNA structure, and the cells start producing these proteins, which are calcium sensitive. Now, if you just continue monitoring the fluorescence activity of your area, you just have some level of fluorescence. But as GCAM in cells binds to more and more calcium ions, it becomes more and more fluorescent. So you suddenly start seeing that your neuron is giving out more fluorescence light. And basically this flood of calcium ions into neurons is related to neuronal activity. So if you just continuously monitor for fluorescence, or if you do fluorescence imaging, you will be looking at the activity of neurons. So GCAMP is one of these tags. These are called GSPs, or green fluorescence proteins. There is a set of them which are called RFPs, which are red fluorescence proteins. The difference is that the green ones fluoresce in green and the red ones fluoresce in red. So in the preclinical studies, what is fluorescing is this beautiful tag or protein called GCAMP. This is from the paper of the group Chen et al., who has actually come up with GCAMP. What you see here is it's a neuron in a petri dish, essentially. And what they have done is they have expressed GCAMP in it, so it has GCAMP, and it is under fluorescence microscope. So they are basically just monitoring the fluorescence level from this neuron. But also the red thing you see here, it signifies this other thing. It's called patch clamping, where it is basically a way of recording the electric activity of the neuron. So you can really look for the action potentials of this one neuron. And action potentials are the activity of spikes of neurons. That's how neurons communicate with each other. So what they are doing here is they are showing the data from both basically the signal from both the fluorescence microscope, which is this blue line here, and from the electric recording, which is the line down here. So for each action potential, they see a rise in the fluorescence signal. So basically here they are showing that there is a one-to-one correlation between the fluorescence signal and the action potentials, so that you can certainly claim that monitoring this fluorescence activity is monitoring the neuronal activity. All right, so this is just a comparison of our system with the existing systems in the market. These are what is other people's systems on the market. They are called miniscopes. There is a small lens implanted in the brain, and this is the whole fluorescence microscope that gets mounted on the head of the animal. This is a mouse, by the way. So these are called miniscopes. They can image one brain area, and the whole device sits on the head of the animal. So you already see the size of the device relative to the size of the body of the animal. On the right side here, basically these are neuroscience multiscopes. We call them multiscopes because you can simultaneously image multiple areas. So this mouse, for example, has 2 of our implants in its head. So one can record from 2 different brain areas. And you can also record from the spinal cord, and you can even record from songbirds, which are really, really tiny. So this bird has, again, 2 of our implants in its head. So our form factor is much smaller. The design is so that people can simultaneously image up to 4 brain or spinal cord areas. It is easily adaptable to other species other than rodents. And it is very flexible, lightweight, easy to use. Now, why do I say those to you guys? I mean, obviously, if I'm going to sell a device, I would say those things, but I'm not selling anything to you. But the thing is, when you are doing R&D in industry, what you really care about is what is the workflow of the end user? How are they going to use this technology? You have to really learn that. And before I started neuroscience, I actually did a 8-9 month postdoc at a neuroscience lab and really saw how they do things. How do they handle animals? How do they disconnect stuff to the head? How do they do surgeries in the brain? So basically, I did a study in all of that. And then you realize that, wow, for neuroscience experiments, it is extremely important for the animals not to get stressed. So actually, neuroscientists spend a lot of time with animals to make sure they don't get stressed. That means when you design a system, it has to be in a way that when the neuroscientist is connecting and disconnecting, whenever they want to use it, whenever they are collecting data, they don't stress the animals. So, so basically, you take all of that into account when you are designing a product. So it is not just the science behind it and the techniques behind it. It is also literally paying a lot of attention to how the user is going to use it and making sure that you come up with a design that matches the user's requirements. So, sorry, I meant to start a timer when I started this. How much more time do I have? You are
You
muted.
have a couple of minutes left.
A couple of minutes. All right. So then let's go show you guys some images then. So in this experiment here, this guy again has two of our implants on its head. This is one field of view. This is the other field of view. They are 1 millimeter in diameter. This is a memory experiment. So the question neuroscientists wants to answer here is, how do our brain form memories, and how do we recall memories? I don't know if you guys have ever thought about this. It's like you enter a place literally only once. Well, if you do machine learning, you have definitely thought about this, that we generally learn by 1 or 2 samples. Like you go to a building once, and then the second time you go there, you don't have to learn it anymore. You already know it. So you learn with just 1 sample. The question is, how on earth our brains do that? So how does the brain learn? How does it memorize? And how do we recall memories at will? Like if I ask you, remember the last time you were on a beach, you're all going to remember that as soon as you read it. So how is that happening? So what they do is, this is basically an experiment where the mouse is going to learn, this is some, I don't know, some bad smell or something comes out of here that the mouse doesn't like. So the thing is, the mouse is supposed to learn after a few days that, this part of the box is not good, so it avoids going there. That's how they know that the mouse learned. Now, in the brain of the mouse, the implants are in the region of the brain called hippocampus, which is the brain region that we know is responsible for encoding memory and for recalling memory. Now, the type of neurons that are tagged, so remember I told you there are different types of neurons in different brain regions, are actually called place cells. And it is incredible because when we go to a place, or when a mouse goes to a place, and by the way, people use mouse because the mouse brain is very similar to human brain. When we go to a place, these place cells activate and they literally map the space we go to. So that's why the place cells are tagged here. And what happens is the researchers will monitor the activities of these same groups of neurons over a few days as the mouse keeps getting put in this box and learning that, okay, this corner, there is something that, it shouldn't go to, basically. So this is one example of the use of the device. Now, of course, what happens is you get this brain movie, and now you need to get the data and extract the data. So you have the brain movie. You need to find the neurons in this brain movie and extract the activity of neurons. So we use machine learning techniques for that. But we also use machine learning techniques. So remember how I started the talk, basically for epilepsy application. Maybe just a short, quick thing on epilepsy. There are animal models of different diseases, including epilepsy. So what happens is we implant this is our quartet system. So we implant the optical probes in the brain of these mice. But in addition to that, we also implant electrodes, which are the gold standard for collecting signals from the brain of animals. So what we do is we have an optical signal and we have an electric signal. Then our experts, they go through the electrodes, the electric signal, and they tell us, okay, this is when the animal sees, this is when the animal sees. And from there, we label the optical data. So this is the data recorded using autofluorescence from the tissue using optical imaging. And as you can see, there's a clear signature for seizures. We then use various types of machine learning models to be able to predict where the seizure is in the brain, so which brain area is giving the seizures and when the seizures start. So there is a lot of usage of machine learning in our application for multiple applications, basically. So one is for the extraction and processing of data for the preclinical application of our technology. And the clinical application, which is epilepsy, uses different types of machine learning techniques to be able to predict seizures. So I'm going to stop here and thank you. And we continuously work with interns and so on. So, so please do reach out to us, especially for machine learning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soudagar. It was really interesting. I think we have time for one question. Let me see here. Right. Yeah, we have one question. Have you tried the multispectral techniques to collect features in different frequencies? And what about the nonlinear behavior of fluorescence labels for the feature extraction? Yeah, so so we haven't tried the hyperspectral or multispectral imaging. And the reason for that is, again, the question is, what do our customers want and what are they willing to adopt? Optical technologies are extremely new in the field of neuroscience. And one of the things people are continuously asked about is, okay, let's say we have all these brain movies. What do we do with it? So how do we analyze this data? How do we even know what we are looking at? So already for this like simple fluorescence imaging, in terms of data analysis and making sense of the data, it is extremely hard. Hopefully, a few years down the road, the field will be advanced enough that the market will ask us to provide them a hyperspectral imaging system. Thank you. I think we have one more question. Sorry, there was something about linearity. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the second part you want to address. Oh, it is the same in the same question. What about the nonlinear behavior of fluorescence labels for feature extraction? So this is what we are using. What the system does is it's called epifluorescence microscopy. So it is actually not nonlinear. And this GCAMP tag, it is shown that the way it correlates basically with action potentials or the activity of neurons, there is basically a one-to-one correlation there. I am not sure what you mean by non-linearity there, but basically the feature extraction is not an easy thing to do. It is an active field of research in machine learning. People use PCA-ICA techniques. People use non-negative matrix factorization techniques. The problem with all of these techniques is that they require a lot of input from the user. There is a lot of parameters to set. They're computationally inefficient. They give a lot of false positives. And because of that, we are working with another company called Rewire Neuro, where basically, so this is like a process that would use PCA-ICA. It would take 2 weeks to extract features from a 2-minute movie. But they have a deep learning algorithm where it reduced that basically to 90 seconds with more than 90% accuracy. So so basically using deep learning methods, it is possible to do that. Okay. Yeah, and the last question. Yeah. So thanks, Nada, for the nice comments there. Actually, Pier-luc, as you were presenting your talk, I'm like, oh, we should talk and see if your 3D solution works with our type of basically if we can image, a live brain with your solution. So
if you can, maybe let me go back to the slide that has my email. If you reach out to me, it would be great. I would love to chat about that, actually.
Okay, great. If anyone else
will
has
do.
questions, please send an email to Dr. Soudagar and ask your questions. Thanks again for your time and great talk.
It's a pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you. I think it's now time to start our 3-minute presentation competition. And I should thank all who has submitted their abstracts and congratulate again to those who has been selected for this competition. As already sent to you by email, the competition is in order. You have only 3 minutes. And when the session chair calls your name on your slides, please turn on your camera. You have 3 minutes to talk. When you want us to go to the next slide, please say go to the next slide. And also keep in mind that chair will stop you if you exceed 3 minutes. This is very important. If you don't show up on the given order, then the next presenter, we jump to the next one. And also some of you who you did not send your presentations, you're already removed from the competition. You see your name there. This is just for the judges to see that you're not there. And that's for the rest of the presenters. And also we don't have any Q&A, and you will be evaluated by the judging panel based on the criteria that I sent you before. And also the judges, they already have their own rubric for this evaluation. So thank you very much. I'll hand it to Dr. Amini for the rest of the competition.
Hello, hello everyone. First of all, I want to thank all of our speakers. Thanks for accepting our invitation and for your great talk. So right now we want to start the 3-minute presentation competition. I want to thank everybody that participated in this competition. So I will call the name and we will unmute the presenter. Then I also keep the track of time with the 3 minutes. So I will let you know when your time is up and you should stop at that point. And once again, there is no Q&A part. Okay, then let's start from the first presenter, Armin Nabai from Concordia University.
Attention mechanism in natural language processing has been at forefront to learn contextual sentence representation. They include 2 consecutive modules, feed-forward layer and a self-attention layer. Unlike recurrent neural network, transformers use attention to capture temporal relation while processing input tokens in parallel in an invariant order way by some techniques such as position embedding and attention masking. Vision transformers have been successfully applied in image classification tasks recently. We can specify some advantages: computational efficiency, scalability, removing need of hand engineering features, and determination long-range dependencies. On the other side, the majority suffer from vanishing gradients, which tend feature maps of top layer identical, means information distribution is concentrated. New works propose multiple heads with capability of capturing different aspects. Other works are done by aggregating feed-forward layer into self-attention layer, replacing conv layer with multi-head attention layer in residual block, and recently utilized gated linear unit to prevent information degradation. Next slide, please. My idea for this work would be improving computation performance and decreasing number of parameters, which would result in elevating time and memory requirements. We know input of vision transforms could be image patches or feature maps provided by feature pyramid network of a CNN backbone called a hybrid model. And also, we know by refining feature maps, a network not only performs well, but it's also robust to noisy input. Another subject is inter and intra-channel processing to find object and where it is located. At the end, in self-attention module, my point of view would be considering only a neighborhood around the input sequence-centered elements. Thanks for attention.
Thank you. You are very on time.
Thank you.
So next, move on to the next speaker, Sandy Atanalian from ETS.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I am Sandy Atanalian, a PhD candidate in electrical engineering at ETS University. Today, I'm going to talk about multi-level converters in EV battery chargers. So at first, let me ask you a question. Do you know that in Quebec, 44% of the greenhouse gas emission comes from the transportation sector, especially fossil fuels, burning cars and trucks? And with the increase of population, there will be definitely an increase in the consumption of petroleum resources, adding more greenhouse gas emission and air pollution to the environment. Therefore, the electric vehicle is an innovative way to substantially cut the greenhouse gas emission and to reduce the pollution. However, even though the electric vehicle has several advantages, a major drawback is the high charging time that limits its use to daily commute and short distance trips. So one of the major questions that almost all the electric vehicle drivers get from the people around is how much do you need to charge the battery of your vehicle? That's why the researchers, they are trying always to expedite the charging time in order to reduce it and increase the rate of the electric vehicle in the transportation sector. So according to the literature review, there are two different architecture for the charging station. The next slide, please. Either sharing a common DC bus or a common AC bus. Sharing a common DC bus is found to be more viable in terms of conversion cost and weight and volume. So in my project, I'm targeting a fast charging station sharing a common DC bus. We'll have at first a central AC-DC converter followed by a DC-DC converter. The AC-DC converter is an integral part because it's interfacing between the grid and the battery. So it must satisfy the grid requirements such as having a low total harmonic distortion and a power factor close to 1. But unfortunately, the conventional two-level AC-DC converters that have been used in the literature suffer from a higher harmonic pollution and a low efficiency. That's why the multi-level converters who are characterized by a lower THD, higher efficiency, could replace these conventional two-level AC-DC converter. So in my PhD, I'm working on the design of a fast charging station sharing a common DC bus with a multi-level configuration for the AC-DC converter, working on the modeling, control, and the design. So using electric vehicle will reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and hence it will reduce the air pollution, and reducing the charging time will increase the employment rate of the electric vehicle in the transportation sector. All of this will lead to the global transportation electrification that the government of Quebec is adopting currently. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sandy. You're also on time. So move on to the next speaker, Ian Lam from Carleton University.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll start now. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Lam, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Carleton University. Today, I'll just give a short presentation on my work on drone detection with radars. So one of the main challenges in using radar to detect drones is to distinguish between similarly sized objects. And drones being, as technology advances, drones are becoming smaller and smaller, approaching the size of birds. And so this poses a problem for radars, as shown succinctly in the picture to the left right there. So to explore this problem, I took two data sets of two similarly sized objects. One is a plastic bird, a toy bird whose wings flap to mimic the flight of a bird, and a quadcopter drone, the DJI Spark, shown to the right. And you can see from this, taking the short time Fourier transform of the radar returns, you can see that there's clearly different features present in the two data sets. And so it is possible to use machine learning to efficiently and accurately distinguish these two types of objects. Next slide. And so now everyone would want to, with the miniaturization of drones, security and privacy would be a concern. And so everyone would be installing their own radars in dense urban environments. So what would be the effect of running multiple radars in close proximity with each other? So under certain assumptions, the probability distribution functions of radars can be analytically modeled, shown on the plot on the left. So with the red curve being with the target present case, and the blue curve will be the target absent case. And so to explore this problem, I took data sets using two data sets using corner reflectors. So the first one on the top right is using single radar when one radar is operating, and the bottom right would be when two radars are operating in close proximity with each other. And because there is a target present, it should look like the red curve. But you can clearly see that with the two radar operating case, it looks very much different from that, but it looks similar to the single radar case. And so this shows that in the future, when radars become more and more prevalent, we should be aware of the assumptions in our radar detection modeling. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. This was also on time. So let's go to next speaker, number 4, Camille Lenormand from ETH University. Sorry if I mispronounced your family name.
Oh, it's okay. Hi, everyone. So I suppose you all know someone with osteoarthritis, maybe a relative, a grandparent, or even a complaining neighbor. Therefore, you should probably know that this pathology, for which there is no cure yet, induces many difficulties in the life of a person who suffers from it. Especially with osteoarthritis of the knee, basic activities such as walking becomes really difficult. Well, knee kinesiography is a clinical exam allowing to diagnose pathologies, for instance, knee osteoarthritis. More generally, it allows the identification and quantification of 3D biomechanical markers related to knee function during gait. Next slide, please. In clinics, the knee kinesiography exam is performed as follows. So first, the patient walks for several minutes on a treadmill wearing the EKG system, which is a device already being sold in clinics around the world by the company eMovie to help manage knee pain. This harness is attached to the thigh and leg and allows to reduce skin motion artifacts and thus allowing accurate and repeatable measurements of knee movement. So the sensors on the EKG system allow the tracing of 3 curves representing the movement of the knee in the 3 anatomical planes. And finally, from these curves are extracted the 3D biomechanical markers to which I referred just before, allowing then the clinician to judge the normal or abnormal movement of the knee and then propose a treatment plan adapted to the patient. So currently, the knee kinesiography exam is performed using an optoelectronic system, which is costly and limits the study to the laboratory environment. Thus, the objective of my project is twofold. At first, to develop a calibration method to perform this exam with inertial sensors, which are cheaper and more versatile. Secondly, we will use artificial intelligence to extract the 3D biomechanical markers directly from the raw data of inertial sensors. The overall goals of this research project are to improve and expand the applications of knee kinesiography, to accelerate as well the technology transfer of innovations in the motion analysis field to industry, and make it accessible to a greater public. Indeed, the final result of this research project will be transferred to industry as a tool, allowing ambulatory gait analysis in clinic to detect and manage knee problems early and to effectively guide its rehabilitation as well. Finally, my research could guide future studies to use inertial sensors for motion analysis, not only for the knee, but also for other joints in the body, taking research at...
Sorry, your time is up.
Okay.
So next, move to the next speaker, Gali.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, from McGill University. Yes, go ahead.
Data is growing at a staggering rate for even increasing number of types and sources. This explosive data growth is placing an enormous demand on the network, having 5 times more traffic occurring within the data center compared to the total internet traffic. This requires data center to have more connectivity between its computing rack. Unfortunately, this has created a big power dissipation that is coming from the fact that we hit the copper wire used when transferring information. One large data center requires a large amount of electricity, enough to power 80,000 US households. What is more sad about that is that 43% of this power is for cooling the computers only. This is an image of Microsoft putting their computing rack inside an ocean. This is to illustrate how desperate computing industry is with a solution. Next. Next, please. But optics or photonics can alleviate that. We can connect computer chips inside the data centers using light, and that doesn't burn any power. These chips are based on silicon. Everyone in here should have a piece of silicon, otherwise you cannot join this meeting. And to realize this, what we need is a complete Lego set of materials on top of silicon substrate. As an example, you need germanium on silicon to make a photodetector that will be used as the receiver in the computing rack. The problem is when we grow germanium on silicon, which is commonly occurred in vertical manner, atomic imperfections are generated that looks like half loops inside the germanium. The presence of these imperfections degrade the performance of the later to be grown photodetectors. An interesting question to ask is, can we extend the first half loop of imperfection and make it reside in the interface of these two materials, other than creating another one, and another one inside the germanium? The answer is yes. By using gold in the laboratory, we can actually make the germanium to grow in lateral direction. And this makes the first imperfection to stay and reside in the bottom. As a result, we can get a high quality germanium films on silicon substrate. Using this method, virtually you can make any materials on top of silicon substrate for virtually any applications. And we hope in the near future, we can complete our Lego collections of photonic materials for creating the next generation data centers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. So it was 1 second before 3 minutes, so that's good. So let's move on to the next speaker, Ziya Sharifi from Carleton University. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Ziya, and I'm a PhD student in Carleton University. My friends and I are working on a literature review on monitoring critical infrastructure using 3D LiDAR point clouds. Many critical infrastructures can be effectively monitored using emerging technologies such as LiDAR. LiDAR technologies enables active remote sensing based on the platform from airborne or terrestrial systems. Over the last few years, the number of available LiDAR data sets has been steadily increasing. You can see here in the first slide, you can see the some examples of the data sets for object semantic segmentation applied to self-driving cars. Our survey discusses LiDAR technology available for commercial and research use and explores the relevant applications of LiDAR for critical infrastructure resilience. Generally, LiDAR can be used in a wide range of applications based on the time limitations. Here, I just mentioned the main title of these applications. In the road transportation area, I can mention road geometric properties extraction, road surface, center line, and boundaries detection, road detection in autonomous driving system, and asphalt pavement distress identification or street traffic sign and light pole detection in the area. In the rail transportation area, I can mention railroad elements extraction, train localization, and the railroad power line extraction. In the air transportation area, I mentioned fine object detection or weather analysis. In the pipelines area, we are working on the pipelines leak detection or water pipeline assessment. In the electrical power transmission and distribution equipment, we are monitoring the power transmission and power parts condition. Also, it has some applications in the mining, like mine mapping, in the nuclear plants, like radioactive waste site localization, and in the security, like people detection and tracking. Next slide, please. Yeah, here you can see some figures that represents the different areas of applications for critical infrastructure monitoring using LiDAR. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Zia. You are also in time. And let's move to the next speaker. Yasaman Soudagar from ETH University, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My subject is blockchain traceability in healthcare, blood donations supply chain. As all you know, blood plays an important role in human life, and the transfusion is essential in surgery, organ transplant, and critical treatment, and other emergencies. And also, it's considered a costly product. It should avoid wasting because there is no alternative of blood to be replaced. And unfortunately, in 2035, there is about 25 until 40% shortage in the blood donation supply chain. Besides that, in the last 2 decades in US, for example, it was about 600 cases that because of transfusion of polluted blood, they got HIV, AIDS, or syphilis, and this kind of problem still exists in some developing area like South Africa, India. And there are, with the current blood donation supply chain, there is some risks: transfusion of polluted blood, ethical risk, and counterfeiting and the forgery of medicinal products. As you see in this presentation, there is two: the centralized blood supply chain, what is current now, and the decentralized blood supply chain that we created by using blockchain technology. In the centralized one, there is a single point of failure: lack of transparency, traceability, and immutability of the data. But in the decentralized one, we can bring more security and transparency and immutability of the donors. What is our approach? Our goal is to introduce transparency and immutability to the current blood donation supply chain, and also access control vulnerabilities have been reduced by using a smart role-based access management in our system. And also privacy preserving concern have been alleviated by encryption the donor personal information. It needs to talk about some definition. What is blockchain? Blockchain is the distributed peer-to-peer system. There is no central authority to control and manipulate data, and all participants talk to each other And we have the chain of the block. Every block contains of the data. And also, what is Ethereum? Ethereum is open software platform based on blockchain technology that enables developers to build and deploy decentralized application. And at the end, a smart contract is a program which execution is autonomous and totally transparent. Second slide, please. At the second slide, yes, this is a part of our design. For facilitate of using decentralized application, we use React framework and one of the best development framework for web environments. In order to connect application to the Ethereum blockchain, we consider using Web3.js and we use MetaMask, a cryptocurrency wallet, to manage accounts and sign transaction to communication with Ethereum blockchain. At the end, I have to say, we use blockchain Ethereum platform to bring more traceability and transparency and safety and privacy preserving of all the donors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sami.
Yes. Yes.
Let's move on to the next speaker, Homa Tahvilian from Concordia University.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
The topic of my presentation is detections of multiple sclerosis by optical coherence tomography images analysis using the functional shape framework. Multiple sclerosis, or MS, is an inflammatory and neurodegeneration disease of the central nerve system, which usually present in young adults. MS characteristic by demyelinations and subsequent axonal loss affecting mainly the inner retinal layer. Neuroaxonal loss is irreversible and has a major impact on physical and cognitive functions in MS patients. So, validate imaging modality is needed to monitoring and diagnosis of MS. MRI is widely used in clinical as a non-invasive diagnosis tool for detecting and evaluations of characteristic inflammatory lesions and tissue atrophy in brain and spinal cord. Although MRI is very useful tool to detect brain atrophy, it is less accurate for axonal injury, neuronal loss, synaptic and myelin loss. In addition, other disadvantage of MRI is high cost and is not available in most of the clinics. Optical coherence, or OCT, is a non-invasive high-resolution imaging techniques for assessment of the thickness of retina. Retina is a thin sheet tissue that covers the inner walls of the eye and consists of multiple layers, but the most important of layer is which is play a significant role in monitoring and assessment of the neurodegeneration in MS is ganglion cell linear plexiform layer, or GCIPL. In this study, the applications of F-shape method is presented to perform a variability analysis on the shape and related signals in retinal OCT images in order to differentiate HERC from MS subject. The F-shape framework uses the surface geometry together with functional measures such as retinal layer thickness defined on the surface. In our approach, we use the first surface as a geometry and GCIPL thickness map as a thickness in order to create the F-shaped object. And as we can see, the F-shape approximations in those figures show the atrophy and the significant atrophy for MS patient. At the end, SPM classifier was used to automatically classify healthy from the MS disease. Based on our knowledge in previous study, a securitarization approach are used to assessment the thickness map of retinal layer. And this method based on averaging on local area. However, the F-shape is not based on averaging and based on point-wise assessment. So it is very accurate in comparison to sectorization.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Your time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Homa. Next, move on to the next speaker, Rachel Cohen from Toronto Rehabilitation Institute. Please go ahead.
I think we've all picked up new hobbies over the pandemic, and personally, I've gotten really into gardening. But unfortunately for my plants, I am a horrible plant mom, and I sometimes go weeks without watering them. There are some plants like a cactus that have no problem with this, but there are others like an orchid that really always start wilting because they don't have the same ability to regulate water in their systems. The same thing happens to us as we age. Older adults have a hard time regulating water in their system, causing dehydration and leading to more serious consequences, such as hospitalizations and even death. There's a few factors at play here. For example, as we age, we can actually lose the ability to feel thirsty and just forget to drink. We also have less water naturally in our bodies. So if we lose just a small amount, that can lead to really dire consequences. And those warning signs, like the wilting petals, those warning signs, those can actually be not accurate in older people. So it can be really difficult to diagnose dehydration. Healthcare professionals are now saying we should focus on preventing dehydration by making sure that older adults are drinking enough fluid throughout the day. And that is exactly my intent with my master's thesis. So as you can see here on the screen, there's different sensors, and these are being used to detect when a person takes a drink and how big that sip is. The smart watch is monitoring the hand to mouth motion. The smart shirt is capturing breathing signals because when you take a breath, you actually momentarily when you take a drink, you momentarily stopped breathing. And the camera and depth camera are capturing images for image classification. The depth camera is just a more privacy-preserving way to do so. Using artificial intelligence and machine learning, I can combine the data from these sensors, and in preliminary results, I've obtained a classification accuracy of 90%, determining if someone's taking a drink or not. Also, by using all of these sensors, I can determine which ones lead to the highest accuracy, but also being the least cumbersome on the patient. This way, we can get an accurate picture of how much the person is drinking throughout the day, and then prompt them to drink based on that if they're not meeting their targets. This will help older adults stay independent and healthy for longer, living in their homes for longer, and also prevent hospitalizations due to dehydration. This will keep your loved ones and help them go from wilting flowers to flourishing ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Let's move on to the next speaker, Yasaman Soudagar from McGill University.
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Hassan, a postdoc from McGill. Today, I'm presenting challenges ahead for Canada, the carbon footprint of deep neural networks. Deep neural networks have been involved in our daily lives. For example, we utilize natural language processing models in Alexa. However, as DNN's applications become more complex, the size of corresponding models grows exponentially. As you can see in the below chart, just within 2 years from birth language processing model with hundreds of millions parameters, we came to GPT-3, which has hundreds of billions learnable parameters. As you can see in the right-hand side chart, the complexity of deep neural networks translates to energy consumption and carbon footprint, and they grow exponentially as well. For instance, assume if a practitioner around Canada work on just one of these huge models such as GPT-3 and train it only for 10K times. This results in consuming the electricity of 1/4 of Montreal city during a year, and it pollutes CO2 equivalent to the life cycle of 100,000 cars. Note that these statistics are only for one model, and the complexity of models increases year by year. Therefore, a huge challenge is in front of Canada. Next slide, please. Let's see how we can address DNN CO2 emission problem. We can choose green cloud computing providers and also avoid local inefficient computing. However, these methods only hide the problem. Utilizing more efficient hardware cannot be a panacea as well. Efficiency of hardware scales linearly year by year, while DNN's complexity grows exponentially. We propose to make DNN's design environmental friendly. In other words, we consider energy consumption factor in the DNN's design process. The outstanding news is that, unlike other mentioned methods, the energy saving of this approach increases with the pace of model's complexity. For example, in my research, I focused on changing the architecture of BERT. I re-implemented it in the frequency domain. I observed that with a negligible accuracy loss, we can reduce its training time to 1/3. results in a significant reduction in terms of energy consumption and CO2 emission. Let's see what is missing. In this talk, I explained about the importance of environmental effects of DNS. The bad news is that in the research community, this problem is not being acknowledged as it should be. In the below chart, green and orange bars compare the number of papers that target efficiency versus accuracy for deep learning in big AI conferences. As you can see, a few portion of papers address efficient deep neural networks. Therefore, the government needs to intervene, set some regulations, and provide some incentives to address this coming issue. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Hassan. You are also on time. Let's move on to the next speaker, Ankita De from Carleton University. Please go ahead, Ankita.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Ankita De, and today I'll be presenting on statistical processing of infrared thermography for breast cancer screening. The significance of the project lies in the fact that with over 2.3 million cases of breast cancer over the world, there's an alarming and an immediate attention required for developing a technique for early diagnosis of breast cancer. Even though mammography has been considered as a gold standard for detecting breast cancer, it has a number of drawbacks like radiation exposure, risk of tumor rupture, and inaccurate tumor detection, causing a large number of false positives, especially in dense breast. So the aim of the project is to replace mammography with an FDA-approved technique called thermography, which can be used to replace mammography to detect early diagnosis of breast cancer. However, there is a challenge involved in analyzing thermograms. The segmentation failure is one of the most challenging problems that can be addressed and requires immediate attention. As we can see, there's a difference in thermophysical properties obtained and they're distinct in breast tissue as well as cancerous tissue. So the database used for this project has been included. Next slide, please. The pipeline of the project is as follows. We pre-process the image to remove any noise and enhance the edges to facilitate tumor detection. We extract the statistical parameters based on these thermophysical properties like mean, variance, skewness, kurtosis, and entropy, and then calculate the bilateral ratios which analyze the asymmetry between a diseased and a healthy breast. These bilateral ratios are used to detect the region of abnormality as well. To make the project industry ready and user friendly, we have developed an application called Salvador, which is a standalone application. The results you see here are on this application called Salvador, which can easily detect a left cancerous breast, a right cancerous breast, a normal subject, and even cancer in men. So 35 subjects have been used in this study, and a novel method has been developed to detect breast cancer irrespective of gender without involving any machine learning, and which can be run on any environment. However, there is a drawback in case of pregnant subjects as well as in bilateral synchronous breast cancer subjects where there are both the breasts are cancerous. So we want to extend the work in that domain. Even grading of tumors and identification of cancer can be also done with the help of this technique. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankita. Next, move on to the next speaker, Saide Kalantari from Concordia University.
Hi, everyone. Lots of us have heard this expression from our grandparents at least once, think with your heart. But now I'm gonna tell you, open the locks with your heart. But why and how? You deal with authentication multi-times a day, and you may use your passwords, your access cards, your fingerprint, your palm print, your face, iris, or even your voice as a security key. But unfortunately, all of these keys suffer from spoof attacks. So physiological signals attracted the scientists as biometrics. In this meantime, ECG got more popularity for its inherent characteristics. Your heart has the special size, shape, and the position in the heart, in the chest. And also your body tissues have a specific electrical conductivity. So your ECG is unique to you and can be your ID card. Also, ECG is very difficult to spoof attacks because it's a continuous and non-stationary signal. Please, the next slide. Your physical, this continuous variability that is very good from one point of view can be a disadvantage. Your physical activities, your emotional situations, and even your aging can affect your heart activities and also affect your ECG. So it's very important to find the most stable ECG features. Another challenge in this field is time management. Time reduction is very necessary because you cannot wait several minutes for authentication. Time management depends on the processing techniques and the required ECG record for authentication. In this research, we tried to develop an accurate and time-saving ECG-based authentication method. And we used the discrete wavelet transform to merge the noise filtering and feature extraction phases. By now, we succeeded to achieve an average accuracy of 99.38% using just 2 seconds of ECG record in a very short processing time. And you can see that our accuracy in comparison to the state of art are pretty better. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Saide. Next speaker, Mahsa Hadian from Polytechnic Montreal. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Smart campus comprises several buildings which are geographically near each other, connected to each other, and collect data in one single data center, like university campus or hospital campus. Building managers and decision makers need to monitor this data to manage cost and energy at the computation level to make proper decision in real time. Therefore, smart building needs to be reliable, scalable, scale up and down, and have high computational power to manage big data storage and intensive data transfer in real time. This prototype brings up the comfort for occupants while considering the cost and energy. As you see in this figure, the framework includes 3 layers: sensor layer, edge layer, and cloud layer. Sensor layer and edge layer, which are in the local, and cloud is somewhere else. The process begins when the sensors like door, camera, security, or other kind of sensors which are distributed in the building, generating the data, then send data to the nearest edge device. Here we use Raspberry Pi as an edge device because it's lightweight and more efficient. On the edge, we have a message queue. Once data enter to the queue, it becomes available for the pre-processing based on the Spark streaming. And Spark can clean the data, pull the data, and emptying the buffer periodically. Next data sent to the NoSQL database, which is on the cloud side. The tools that we use for this prototype are as MQTT as a message broker, Telegraph for connecting the different layers, InfluxDB as a NoSQL database, which is on the cloud side, and Grafana, which connected to the InfluxDB to actually visualize the data. We deploy everything and every application on the Docker container and manage them by Docker Compose. We use Docker container because of the ability to balance the workload and for scalability. Next slide, please. To benchmark the prototype, we define different scenarios. For example, baseline, we just measure the energy and performance of the edge device, Raspberry Pi, with running no containers on it. And then 4 different scenarios: 1 sensor send data, then 2 sensors send data at the same time, 100 sensors and 150 sensors send data. And during this sending, we just measure the performance and energy. And as you see in the energy, the more workload, the more energy, but we don't have the same behavior for the performance as you see in the 100 and 150. And then we have to model this data to understand the metrics behavior based on the workload. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahsa. Let's move on to the next speaker, Asil Kok from McGill University.
The next generation wireless communication networks, namely 5G and even 6G, will improve our wireless experience far beyond than 4G ever could. Considering various applications, you will feel it in your phone, your home, your car, and even in the city around you. 5G does this magic by satisfying the key requirements, like extremely high data rates and capacity. Then the question is how? How can 5G address these requirements? The first answer is for sure we need to develop more advanced wireless technologies. Also, considering the recent development in AI and machine learning, we can apply them as a powerful tool to solve extremely complex problems in wireless communications. My name is Asil. I will present AI-assisted Massive MIMO communication systems. Let's first start with Massive MIMO. Here, MIMO stands for multiple input, multiple output, which means we use multiple antennas. The conventional MIMO systems mostly consider up to 4 antennas. Recently, there was a paradigm shift in the MIMO technology, so-called Massive MIMO, where the number of antennas is very large. As we move from MIMO to Massive MIMO, we can support larger number of users with the benefit of higher capacity and connectivity. However, as we serve multiple users, there is an interesting question. How should we allocate power among the users to maximize the capacity? Unfortunately, the traditional optimization techniques cannot find an optimal solution. So in this study, we aim to apply both AI and ML. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. First, we apply particle swarm optimization, which is a nature-inspired AI algorithm. It employs multiple search agents to find the optimal solution. Although it achieves the optimal capacity, its computational complexity make it impractical for the real-time applications. Afterwards, we develop a deep learning-based power allocation algorithm. It's a supervised machine learning mechanism because it's trained via PSO. The first illustrative results consider a setup where we have 6 users served by a base station having 256 antennas. In all datasets, the proposed DLPA algorithm greatly enhanced the capacity compared to equal power allocation. Also, it closely approached to the optimal capacity provided by PSO. Then we apply the runtime analysis by running the trained neural network on both MATLAB and the Xilinx AI card. In figure 3, the blue curve shows us the runtime of the DLPA as less than a millisecond, which is significantly smaller than the PSO. To sum up, the proposed algorithm achieves a near optimal capacity for Massive MIMO systems while reducing the runtime more than 99%, which looks appealing for the real-time applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Asil. Let's move on to the next speaker, Nada from Concordia University.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nada, and I'm a PhD student at Concordia University. Can we go to this? Over the next few years, we're going to see smart devices going everywhere, being deployed in all sorts of applications, such as smart cities, connected cars, and smart homes. By 2021, 35 billion IoT devices will have been installed around the world. And while that's very exciting, one of the big problems is that most of these devices are constantly monitoring their environment and transmitting huge amounts of data over the network. It is estimated by 2021, the IoT data volume will be around 80 trillion gigabytes, and that's simply mind-blowing. Now, if we want to transmit more data, we need more bandwidth, and a naive approach to improve this situation would be to buy more spectrum, which can be very expensive. For instance, in 2010, Verizon paid over $9 billion for the transmission rights over the 700 megahertz band. Now, here's an idea. Can't we loosen up the static spectrum assignment through a new dynamic access approach? Yes, absolutely. The technology that facilitates such dynamic access is called cognitive radio technology. Now, cognitive radio technology allows IoT devices to perceive their environment and to detect vacant frequency bands to borrow. Now, cognitive radio from the name gives us the idea that those smart devices have a cognition cycle. However, cognitive radio devices only use their current knowledge of the spectrum and they don't learn anything that can help them in the future. We as humans, our brain is sort of always training itself to best interpret information and to learn to identify patterns. Using machine learning places this human learning process into cognitive radio devices and enables the idea of brain-powered communications. By using machine learning, cognitive radio devices could predict spectrum availability and smartly borrow spectrum, allowing them to transmit more data and ultimately increasing the network's throughput by 5 to 10-fold. Next slide, please. Most works in the literature of machine learning-enabled cognitive radio assumes the availability of labeled training data to the algorithm. In practice, acquiring labeled data is a challenging task. Therefore, we propose an unsupervised machine learning approach that only requires a small amount of unlabeled data for training. Additionally, we have overlaid a dimensionality reduction technique on top of our learning framework that helps reduce computational complexity and training time. Our results prove that we have substantially improved the detection performance of cognitive radio devices compared to existing works, allowing them to smartly detect vacant frequency bands and borrow them to transmit their data and improves network throughput. Thank you.
Thank you, Nada. Speaker number 17, Jiho Cho from McGill University.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Imagine the next time you are traveling, you are stuck at the airport, not because of bad weather conditions, busy air traffic, or due to COVID test results. You are stuck because there is a glitch in your flight's software system. Annoying, no? Many of us would be still thanking that this glitch is detected earlier and not when the flight is in air. Unfortunately, these imaginative scenarios are not far away from reality. The history of software projects going wrong is long and includes many instances of software failures, which are not only associated with business or societal cost, but with the loss of human lives too. Based on studies, these failures were avoidable, and 50% of these failures were the result of inappropriate requirement engineering. What is requirement engineering? In simple terms, requirement engineering is a process to understand the needs of a customer. When I'm driving my car and using its navigation system, my need as a customer to find the optimal route from location A to location B, avoiding all traffic and accidents. So poorly defined requirements may make software to fail. Well, that's not just it. The increasing complexity of software systems and time pressure to build and launch these software systems into the market is aggravating this problem further. Can there be a way to automate requirement engineering so that we can define precise requirements quickly? Well, that's the puzzle my dissertation is trying to solve. Next slide, please. In this work, I'm using domain models to handle complexity, which can abstract real-world concepts. These models can help abstracting real-world entities. Believe it or not, anything can be abstracted. For example, this event can be abstracted with two concepts, speaker and listener. As there are many speakers delivering presentation to many listeners, the relationship between speaker and listener is many to many. My research focuses on developing a bot empowered by artificial intelligence. This bot first uses natural language processing techniques to extract important concepts from requirements written in natural language. For example, in this case, airport and flight are the extracted concepts. Then this bot uses machine learning to predict additional information about these concepts, which may not be present in these requirements. For example, arriving and departing airports are just airports. We don't need separate concepts for them. What we need, separate relationships. These extracted domain models then serve as a basis to generate code automatically, that is to build software systems. Amazingly, we are surrounded by software systems. The application which we use to register for this IEEE event is also a software system. This bot aims to assist practitioners such as educators, students, domain experts, and so on. So next time when you experience any glitch in your software system, imagine it the modeling way. Thank you.
Thank you. The next presenter, number 18, David Wang from Carleton University.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Long, a PhD student at Carleton University. My research is on quantum radar signal processing. So, what is a quantum radar? Basically, a quantum radar uses techniques from quantum physics to enhance detection performance compared with conventional radars. In my research, I look at radars based on entanglement. Now, entanglement always seems so mysterious and new agey, but as far as quantum radars are concerned, we don't have to worry about that. All we need to know is that entanglement can help distinguish signal from noise. We can see that on this slide. The orange squiggles are radar signals, the blue squiggles represent noise. Clearly, the quantum radar has a larger separation between signal and noise. That means the signal is less likely to be drowned out, which means better detection performance. And here's one big reason why I wanted to look at quantum radars for my PhD.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Anyways, this is the reason why I wanted to look at quantum radars. Those squiggles that you see on this slide came from a real life experiment. You can see that here as well. So quantum radars can actually be built. And there's a picture to prove it. Okay, so that's quantum radar. What about signal processing? We've got all that fancy equipment, but what information can we squeeze out of it? One thing I found out was that with certain types of quantum radar, there's a very deep connection between quantum radar signals and conventional radar signals. And you can exploit that to do anything a normal radar can do, except in some cases, the quantum radar will do better. So now the question becomes, when can a quantum radar do better? When is a conventional radar good enough? Those are the sorts of questions that I'm trying to answer in my research. Having said all that, there's one very important question remaining. Why should we care? Next slide, please. Well, quantum radar can be a very attractive new option in a number of areas. For example, medical imaging. Here's one important aspect of quantum radars. They can work at extremely, extremely low transmit powers, millions of times lower than a cell phone. So they're definitely safe for use on the human body, and you don't have to worry about radio interference, which is great in airports and hospitals. So to summarize, quantum radars can be built, you can do signal processing with them, and they can be applied to practical problems. And that's why I'm excited to do my PhD on quantum radar signal processing. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Next presenter, number 19, Asfar Adib from Concordia University.
Thank you so much and good evening, everyone. Are you 18 or older? Is that a common question? Sometimes it is. Because there are so many age-appropriate products and services which require to verify someone's age before allowing them to buy or use those. So how do we do that? A common mechanism is to share our identity documents like our driving licenses, our passport, or our health cards. But not everyone may feel comfortable to share those because of privacy concerns. And also there is always a risk of document forgery. So can there be a better alternative to verify age? How about to verify our age based on some biometric signal coming from our bodies? Next slide, please. Let us consider electrocardiogram or ECG. ECG is basically the electric signal coming from our hearts. ECG is always a common diagnostic tool for cardiac diseases. And nowadays, it has become very easy to gain ECG from smartwatches. Usually, ECG indicates the health or the age of our hearts. But can we estimate our actual age, and based on that, can we classify adult and non-adult from ECG? That is the purpose of our research. To do so, we have analyzed ECG records of 300 subjects collected from the PTB ECG dataset, which is a large publicly available ECG dataset. We try to maintain a certain level of diversity in our experimental dataset. For instance, we had 54% male subjects in comparison with 46% female subjects. 44% subjects were non-adults, while 56% were adults. 50% subjects were totally healthy, and 50% had some sort of cardiac abnormality. For each of these samples, we collected 10,000 data points, which were processed through discrete wavelet transformation which is a very common signal processing tool for biomedical signals. We obtained some features, and using these features, we trained our deep neural network model having 3 layers. And in that model, we used RMS prop as an optimization technique. We used a portion of the data to train the network, and we used another portion of data obtained in different time frame to test the network. And at this point, our classification accuracy is in the range of 52% to 65%. That means using this model, we are being able to classify adult and non-adult through ECG during 52% to 65% of the time. This is just the start, because we are continuing our research with the aim to develop a sustainable and more accurate ECG-based age classification system, which can enable to classify adult and non-adult anytime, while fully safeguarding our privacy and data security. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Next speaker, number 20, Youssef Safari from McGill University. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Youssef Safari, and I'm honored to share some parts of my PhD research with you by the title of Power Delivery for Ultra-Large Scale Heterogeneous System, which there has been a surge of demand for them in microelectronic community during the past few years. To be specific, these systems can significantly increase the memory and computing capacity of neural networks, leading to higher accuracy and error resiliency to solve more complex cognitive problems. Moreover, with these systems, we can emulate the brain with more brain-inspired details, for example, modeling more synapses per neurons, which is very critical for diagnosing brain-related diseases like epilepsy at higher resolution. And lastly, these systems can provide more memory compute tiles at a very small intertile spacing, which makes high-performance computing devices extremely compact. Having said that, there are several challenges on the way to realizing these systems containing design, fabrication, and testing stages. And my doctoral research focused on power delivery, which is a key challenge for the enablement of these ultra-large scale systems. Delivering high-quality power at kilowatt scale for a system with numerous heterogeneous voltage domain is a critical challenge. Next slide, please. Here is part of my ongoing research, where we targeted 3 applications of interest for ultra-large scale systems, including neuromorphic computing, AI accelerator, and high-performance computing. For each application of interest, we considered one industrial product, namely Intel Loihi, Google TPU, and AMD EPYC. Then we scaled out these products on a wafer size ultra-large scale platform, and we developed several power delivery topologies, including one peripheral topology shown in the left, and 3 backside power delivery topologies shown on the right. And we matched the best power delivery methodology for each scaled out ultra-large size application. And the result was very interesting. We changed several components of the power delivery network, such as converters, regulators, and interconnect, which significantly increased the efficiency. And the proposed power delivery methodology can deliver up to 45 kilowatt of high quality power, equivalent to energy consumption of 5 average houses in Canada, to a 12-inch wafer of silicon. And more interestingly, all 3 scale-out applications were able to hit the computing capacity of the human brain, which is around 1 petaflops, and which is with proof of concept of large potential of such systems in the near future of semiconductor industry. Thank you for your attention, and have a good day.
Thank you, Youssef. Next speaker, number 21, Vishna Priya from Carleton University. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No problem. Hello, everyone. This is Vishnu Priya, and I'm currently pursuing my Master of Applied Science at Carleton University. Today, I would like to speak about how the IoT applications can be delivered efficiently to the user by enhancing the quality of experience. So before I dive deeper and explain about the significance of research, I would just like to touch upon why edge computing has become so prominent even with the existence of cloud computing. We see that for all the IoT applications such as facial recognition or augmented and virtual reality, there could be many steps that are involved, like object detection as well as segmentation. And all these methods are usually run at a remote cloud, and then the results are sent to the user. Since the remote cloud is usually located very far from the users, frequently sending the tasks over there and computing the results will incur a lot of delay as well as causes a lot of energy consumption. And also because every time all the tasks are sent only to one particular point, there could be frequent outages, and an outage at one point will disrupt the whole service. So this is where edge computing has gained some importance, because over here, the computing can be done at the end of the user and the results can be delivered very effectively. But over here as well, because of the limited resources that are available at the edge server, sometimes the tasks have to be again sent to the remote cloud. So we see like the problem over here, like there will be many tasks that will be generated from many user devices because the number of user devices have been increasing day by day. And all the devices that are generating applications, they have to be very quickly evaluated, and the results have to be sent in the order of milliseconds. So can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so our solution focuses mainly on how like we can consider the network dynamics as well as the different features of the task, such that the overall latency can be minimized as well as the energy consumption can also be optimized. And also we use a technique called caching, like which is done in many of the devices. So over here we focus more on like, you know, how frequently the tasks are requested for in a given situation, and which tasks can be cached owing to the limited resources that are available to the edge server, such that the overall latency can be minimized, as well as because it is in high state dynamic system where we do not know like which kind of task is usually expected. We incorporate deep reinforcement learning methods, which automatically learns the environment without the use of model and try to optimize the overall network performance. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Abdullah Al-Amron from Concordia University.
Hello, everyone. My name is Abdullah Al-Amarian, a PhD student at Concordia University. The title of our research is a low complexity residual deep neural network for image edge detection. Actually, edge detection plays a very important role in several image processing and computer vision applications. This is why currently several edge detection techniques have been developed in the literature. But these techniques focus either to have a high performance network or a low complexity networks. In this research, a new deep neural network have been developed based on the VGG16 architecture. And in this technique, we focus to have a low complexity network, and at the same time, this network have a very good performance that comparable or even superior to the other existing techniques. But how we can achieve the first goal of to have a low complexity network? To achieve this goal, we used the FIRE module. In the FIRE module, the FIRE module consists of two convolution layers. The first layer called squeeze layer and the second layer called expand layer. In the squeeze layer, we are using a small number of filters to produce a small number of feature maps these feature maps will be an input to the expand layer. And in this time, the computational complexity gonna be very low. The next slide, please. You can see in our architecture that we replaced all of the convolution layers of the VGG16 network except the first layer with the FIRE module. And in this case, we will have a small number of parameters. Also, we are interested in the performance. This is why we are using also residual learning in our network. On the right-hand side, you can see our experimental results, and we are comparing our results with the best technique in the literature, currently the BDSN technique by using the ResNet 50 network. You can see that our performance, also here we are presenting two versions, the first one called LRDNN and the second one MLRDNN. You can see that the first one, the performance is comparable to the BDSN network, but our parameters is 4 million parameters, where the first technique with 28 million parameters. So you can see it's a huge difference. But by using the FIRE module, this gives us flexibility to increase the number of filters and the depth of our network. In our second version, we increase the depth and the number of filters. Of course, the number of parameters is going to be increased. We are using 8 million parameters, and you can see that our performance is also better than the BDSN technique, and still the number of parameters of our techniques is still lower than that of the BDSN technique. Thank you so much. Finally, you can see our quality performance. Here we are representing the edge map.
Your time is off, Abdullah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So next, move on to the next speaker, Kwa Tran from Carleton University.
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Kwa and I'm a master's student at Carleton University under the supervision of Dr. Shimon Rajan and Dr. Yuano. So I'm going to present some of our work related to the estimation of carotid intima media thickness using a Gaussian model of ultrasound envelope signals. And so the motivation for this research actually stems from cardiovascular diseases, which have been the #1 cause of death worldwide for a very, very long time. And these cardiovascular diseases, you can think of, for example, heart attacks, heart failures, and strokes. These can actually be easily prevented if the signs are detected early. And so one of these signs, the intima media thickness of the carotid artery, we call it CIMT for short. CIMT is actually the thickness of the two innermost layers of the carotid artery. And as you can see in this diagram, these are the intima and the medial layers. And so CIMT can be estimated using non-invasive ultrasound imaging, where the lumen to intima and the media to adventitia tissue boundaries, these are indicated by distinct echoes in the ultrasound signal. And so typically you could visually measure the distance between the peaks of these echoes, and you can take that value as a CIMT. But this can be widely inaccurate or highly variable when these echoes overlap. And this echo overlap, this occurs when the ultrasound resolution is either too low, or if there's significant interference from adjacent tissues, or a combination of both, which is usually the case. And so the objective of our research was to develop an automatic algorithm that could estimate CIMT while accounting for these issues. And so improving the accuracy and reducing the variability of CIMT estimation, this is really important, right? Because this could help us more reliably detect those who are at risk of developing cardiovascular diseases, and we can provide the appropriate interventions before it is too late. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we propose a simple Gaussian envelope model where the ultrasound envelope signal can be described as a summation of Gaussian functions. And so we set the total number of Gaussian functions to be the same as the number of echoes that we expect to have in our signal. So in this case, we assume there's going to be 3, one for the lumen intima boundary, one for the media adventitia boundary, and another one for the boundary between the adventitia and the surrounding tissues. And so the parameters of the Gaussian functions for each echo, these are estimated using a simple nonlinear least squares method. And the result of this process is a precise mathematical description of the location, width, and amplitude of each echo. And so basically what we've done is we've taken an ultrasound signal and essentially decomposed it into its constituent echoes. And this allows us to extract the peak locations of the two Gaussian functions corresponding to the lumen intima and media adventitia boundaries, and we can calculate the difference to estimate the CIMT. And so we applied this method to in vivo ultrasound data, and we found that this method has reduced variability when compared to the established clinical method. And this is exciting because this algorithm is applicable on one-dimensional ultrasound signals, unlike more common techniques which require 2D ultrasound images, which means that we could potentially monitor the artery using cheaper, low-cost, single transducer, low-resolution ultrasound sensors. And the implication of this is that we can make cardiovascular disease detection widespread and easily accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. So the last presenter, number 25, Hassan Abbasi from Carleton University. Please go ahead.
Hi, my paper title is Fast Wavelet-Based Photoacoustic or PA Microscopy. But what is PA imaging? PA imaging tries to combine ultrasound imaging and also optical imaging in a single modality to reconstruct high resolution and high contrast image at the same time. But how? We use PA effect or photoacoustic effect to do that. Based on this effect, we excite the absorbers inside the tissue, and based on thermal expansion, they generate acoustic waves that we can collect using acoustic sensors and use them for image reconstruction. In the right section, you can see our experimental setup. As you see, we have utilized DMD or digital micromirror device to generate different patterns in each pulse. We have used Haar wavelet patterns here because they need lower samples for image reconstruction rather than other techniques. And also it supports progressive resolution scalability that is very important in image reconstruction. Furthermore, it is very simple to generate them using DMD rather than other complex patterns like Fourier patterns. Next slide, please. In the left section, the workflow of our method has two main steps. In the first phase, we have used Monte Carlo and also K-Wave toolbox to generate and estimate the propagation of optical and acoustic waves respectively. As we have utilized wavelet patterns in illumination, we can reconstruct images easily using inverse wavelet transform. And also, right section shows our results. Obviously, our result is much better than SIR-PAM technique that utilizes Fourier patterns instead of wavelet patterns that we have used. Also, if you consider figure D, clearly the edge spread function of our method has lower noise and also lower distortion rather than SIR-PAM method. Also, figure E illustrates that our method has a narrower line spread function that shows the ability of our method for high resolution reconstruction rather than other techniques. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Hassan. So this is the end of presentation. Just a second. So I want to give you about 5 minutes break to get the result of the judging panel. Then we will have the announcement and the award ceremony for the first three ranking presenters. So we'll see you back at 8:45. Hello again. First of all, I want to thank all the presenters. Thanks for sharing your research work. It was really interesting to hear from different research groups, and it is really difficult from judging panel to the shortlisted only 3. So I'm waiting for Dr. Sadranzami to announce the winners. So please bear with us.
Hi again. Thanks to all the presenters and all the judges. It was really a tough competition, and the final points are very close, just with very marginal difference. So I'll share my screen with the results. So the first, we start with the third place. Actually, we have 2 third place. And Saide Kalantari from Concordia University, congratulations.
Can you make the full screen?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you
Aide.
so much.
And the second, third place, Hua Tran from Carleton University.
Thank you.
Congratulations. What?
The second place, Rachel Cohen from Toronto Rehabilitation Institute.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Rachel.
And the first place, Syed Hassan Muzaffari from McGill.
Thank you so much. Thanks. I do appreciate it. That's an honor for me.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And congratulations to all the other presenters. It was great talks. Thank you. And it was very tough, as I said, and very close final points from the judges.
And can you give an explanation of how the winners can receive their awards?
Yeah, for the winners, please send your mailing addresses to us, and it takes, I think, some time to process, and you directly receive your prizes from IEEE Montreal section, and also these certificates. I'll send you myself the e-certificates. I can send it like in a couple of days. So before the end of the session, and please, if you would like, please turn on your cameras. We can take a photo all together. We cannot have everybody in one picture, no?
Yeah, maybe we can take the two Photoshop. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
first take from the first page and then from the second.
Ready? So next one to the next page. Again, ready?
You got it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So on behalf of the IEEE Montreal section and IEEE Industrial Relations Committee, I would like to thank all our speakers and presenters. I think everyone has enjoyed the talks. I would also like to thank all the attendees who have been present during the talks, and I hope that this event has been a good experience for all of you. And we all hope that our future events will be in person with networking and with refreshments. And congratulations again to our winners. As I said, send us your mailing addresses. And one last point, if you're interested to be part of the IEEE Montreal section and especially IEEE Montreal Industrial Relations Committee as a volunteer, please send an email to us. And because we have a few positions available in the IRC Montreal and in the IEEE Montreal section. So thank you very much again and have a wonderful evening. I hope to see you all in the future events.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And so you can
Thank you. Bye.
have access to our email address from the website.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.